Hey there folks, and welcome back to Nature Explained. I'm your host Jake, and in today's feature we'll be looking at the largest predator in Australia, apex of its environment, and its name is the dingo, the feral fury of Australia. Dingoes are found across the Australian mainland, in every state except for Tasmania. Usually, they are most abundant in central and northern Australia. Their habitats involve temperate forests, alpine marshlands, arid deserts, tropical forests, as well as wetlands. A general rule is if there is some water in the area, dingoes will be found. It is believed dingoes acquired much of this vast range through travelling with Aboriginals when they migrated to Australia, but more on that later. Dingoes are also found on the islands of Kurragami, otherwise known as Fraser Island, as well as Wangarmi, otherwise known as Dingo Island. I apologise for butchering those pronunciations. These populations are significant for reasons we'll discuss later, so stay tuned because now we're going to be talking about the physical features of the dingo. Dingoes, in case you couldn't tell, are medium-sized canids, which is the same family as dogs and wolves. I want to clarify that dingoes are not dogs. More on that later. The weight of the dingo varies on where they live, but on average, males weigh up to 15.8 kilograms, whereas females weigh slightly less, being 14.1. Often, they will look extremely skinny, but this is because they don't keep large fat reserves. With many dingoes in the wild showing ribs, this doesn't mean they're particularly unhealthy. Instead, this is a way of keeping cool, coupled with a general lack of food and some evolutionary tactics we'll talk about later. A male dingo is around 49 inches long, with females being 48. This lack of weight allows them to achieve top speeds of 37 miles per hour, which is useful when hunting prey. Dingoes in the north and northwest are generally the biggest, as they have access to more resources and have fewer humans to intervene and compete with. There are three main dingo coat colours: tan or ginger with white markings found across the body. Three main dingo coat colours: tan or ginger with white markings found across the body. This is the most common, being found in 74% of dingoes. Black and tan is the second most common. This is found in around 12% of dingoes. A creamy white dingo makes up around 2% of the population, and pure black dingoes make up just around 1% of the population. An interesting difference between dingo populations is that in most populations, dingoes only have one fur layer, but in the colder mountain regions, some dingoes have evolved a doubled layer coat, which will appear grey. Dingoes have also evolved paws that don't have dew claws, which are claws found on the inside of the canid's leg. In the majority of canid species, this is useless, hence why dingoes have cut them out of their biology altogether. A dingo tail will be around 30 centimeters long and will generally be straight to help them with balancing and moving around. Dingoes can live up for around 3 to 5 years on average, and push at 7 to 8 in the wild, although in captivity they can live for up to 20. The closest living relative of the dingo is the New Guinean singing dog. The two likely shared a common ancestor when the Aboriginals crossed the land bridges into Australia around 6,000 years ago. A unique adaptation of the dingo is that they can rotate their wrists more than any other canid. The reason for this is that it helps them to traverse mountainous terrain. They have also allegedly used this adaptation to turn doorknobs and raise latches. Alongside this, dingoes have highly flexible joints, which will be used in conjunction with their wrists to climb things, including fences, cliffs, trees, and large roots. All of this is helped by the dingo's small weight, increasing their ability to do this successfully. Dingoes have excellent night vision, which gives them an extra heads up when hunting in the night. But to learn more about that, stick around till Behaviours. Dingoes also have highly sensitive ears, which allow them to identify prey before they can see them. Dingoes also have a highly acute sense of smell, and will use this to track prey for up to a kilometre at a time. Because Australia is basically a massive desert, dingoes have had to evolve to withstand prolonged periods without water. So, a fully grown dingo can survive 22 days without drinking, and the average dingo will drink around 1 litre a day, and this hydration includes the stuff they get from food. As mentioned in the previous chapter, dingoes have different coloured coats, but there is a correlation between the environment and the coat colour. Generally, and I will point out this is a generalisation, in woodlands there's a higher chance of the coat of the dingo being darker than in the deserts. The reason for this is that it provides the dingo vital camouflage in its chosen environment, which is invaluable for dingoes as they are carnivores, being the biggest in Australia. Dingoes are usually opportunistic, as well as having a more generalist diet, which is vital because they need to eat whatever they can get their claws on. So, dingoes have been recorded eating 177 different species. The main part of their diet are kangaroos. But it's not unheard of for dingoes to hunt cattle, wallabies, long-haired rabbits, wombats, as well as magpies. But I should point out, it really does depend on the region. For example, populations living in the deserts will consume more lizards, but coastal populations are known to eat various species of penguin, including the king penguin, which I've made a video on if you want to check it out. If you're enjoying today's video, I'd greatly appreciate it if you hit that like and subscribe button with notifications on. It really does help us out. Also, if you want to see us cover a specific animal, then leave a comment and I'll be sure to add it to the list. So, back to it, as we start looking at the fascinating behaviours of the dingoes. Dingoes are generally pack hunters, although hunting in a pack will depend on the size of the prey. When hunting a kangaroo, a dingo will usually chase it to the point of exhaustion, using its highly manoeuvrable and light body to keep up. Another favourite strategy is to initially attack the legs of the kangaroo before closing in for the kill, because if the kangaroo cannot run away, the odds of success go up. Similarly, the more members in the hunting party also increase these odds. Although, it is not impossible for a single dingo to hunt a kangaroo successfully. Usually, these are younger or older individuals in the mob, but rarely will dingoes go after healthy adults. Usually, these encounters will end in a draw, such as when an eastern grey kangaroo went for an hour fighting off a dingo. The same principle applies when hunting water buffalo, cattle, horses and camels. A pack of dingoes revolve around a mating pair, with the offspring of the previous year making up the rest of the pack. Sizes do vary on access to resources, but usually packs range from 3 to 12 individuals. The males will generally be more dominant within the pack, being the first to have access to resources such as food and water. Dingoes will establish fixed territories in which to live. However, in Central Australia, these territories are looser because there are fewer resources to go around. During times of famine, it's not uncommon for dingoes to migrate outside of their established territories. However, this is extremely rare because they usually don't fare well during these migrations. Males will scent mark on key landmarks in its territory. They do this usually by peeing. This ensures that all other dingoes know that this is their territory and not to impose. Dingoes are most active during the night, as it is cooler during the day, but they can also be active during the twilight hours in cooler regions. Dingoes have a highly complex way of communicating. They will show respect to dominant males or members of the pack by keeping their tails low and whimpering. Dingoes often communicate through agnostic communication, which includes things like playing and making physical contact. This comprises 65% of all social interactions. They will occasionally bark, usually when communicating over long distances or when threatened. And, as always, for your pleasure, I give you the sound of the dingo. Dingoes are generally monogamous, which means they mate for life. A female dingo will come into season twice per year, but will only give birth to a litter of pups once per year. Generally, the breeding season will occur between March and May, with prospecting bachelors making a call over long distances in order to attract a mate. In the pack structure, the alphas will be the only pair to breed, and the female will often suppress other females within the pack from attempting to mate, often through violent means. Once pregnant, the female will dig out a den. She will give birth to her pups. Although dingoes are not above using the dens of other animals, such as wombats, but they could choose to den in hollow logs or inside of caves. Gestation will last from 61 to 70 days. Typically, pups will be born between May and August, which is the winter for Australia, as per always, unless it's in the tropical region, where it could happen any time of year. The litter will vary in size, being somewhere between 1 and 10 pups. Usually, the average is around 5, with typically more males than females. Last year's pups will help their parents in raising this year's pups. If the alpha female finds out that one of her subordinates has given birth to a litter, she will kill the pups without hesitation in order to give her pups the best odds of surviving. Once born, pups will stay in the den, maturing. After 3 weeks, they will begin to leave the den, always accompanied by an adult within the pack. After 8 weeks, they will fully leave the den, but will stay within a 2-mile radius, as they become more familiar with the outside world, with play being an important part of their early development. Initially, the pack members will provide the pups with regurgitated food from kills, but after 9 to 12 weeks, they will start to bring them solid foods. After a while, pups will begin to accompany adults on the hunting, but will learn through observation, learning the tactics used by the adults in the pack. They will slowly become more independent until at around 3 to 4 months, they are fully grown and technically independent, but they will stay with their parents for one breeding season to help them with the next litter of pups. They will leave their parents at around 10 months old in order to start their own pack. Sexual maturity differs depending on the sexes. Males can start breeding anywhere between 1 to 3 years old, depending on where they live. Females usually start at 2 years old, but they may never reach this age, as despite being the dominant predators of Australia, young dingoes are fairly vulnerable to competition from other dingoes, as well as feral dogs, cats, alongside red foxes. It is also not uncommon for water buffalo, camels and cattle to kill young dingoes if they get too close to comfort. It's also not uncommon for snakes to kill dingoes through their bites. And, although somewhat rare, wedge-tailed eagles, which are the largest eagles in Australia, will try to kill dingo pups. There's also an argument that dingoes are under threat from interbreeding with feral dogs in most of Australia, except for the islands of Kirigami, or otherwise known as Fraser Island, and Wangari, Dingo Island. These populations are unique, as dogs were never introduced to these islands. But I should point out, there is much debate over the concept of a purebred dingo. Nonetheless, really, the biggest threat to the dingo is, as always, humanity. Before we start on that, I should answer a question you may have had since the beginning of this feature. Is a dingo a dog or a wolf? Now, this is a subject regularly debated by naturalists. The current opinion is that dingoes are the intermediary breed between dogs and wolves, possibly being more related to ancient wolves from Southeast Asia, who came to Australia with Aboriginals. And you can see parts of the dog behaviour in the fact that they are able to understand human hand signals. An interesting fact about dingoes, it is believed that they outcompeted the main predator of the Australian mainlands before they arrived, that being the Tasmanian tiger, alongside them being the Tasmanian devil. As a result, the two species would go extinct on the Australian mainland and would be regulated to the island of Tasmania. Dingoes are generally not aggressive towards people and often will roam suburbs in search of food during the night. In fact, a study found that rubbish from households made up 60 to 70% of a dingo's diet when they had access to it. Dingoes are often blamed for the death of sheep, goats as well as cattle, many sheep and goat farmers adopting a kill-on-sight policy if they see a dingo. Cattle farmers are slightly more tolerant in general because cattle are larger and will only kill a dingo if they come too close to the cattle. During the beginning of the 20th century, the Australian government had a bounty on dingo hides, but in the modern day, poisoning is argued to be a necessary way to keep the dingo populations low. However, these measures were controversial and still are, because it is argued they are ineffective. Another measure that the Australian government introduced in order to keep dingoes out of sheep country was to undertake the construction of the dingo fence, the longest fence in the world, meaning 3,488 miles, or, in case you don't speak proper, 5,614 kilometres. Although it is uncommon, dingoes will attack people, but this is usually the result of people feeding them, making the dingoes aggressive when a person doesn't have any food. But when attacks do happen, they're often not fatal. For example, between 1996 and 2001, there were 279 dingo attacks, with only 39 of these being fatal. Unfortunately, many of these were children, which hasn't helped the reputation of the dingo. However, it is believed that many sheep attacks associated with dingoes are actually the result of feral dogs, and because of the similarities between dingoes and dogs, the dingo are blamed for them. That all being said, in 2024, a census was conducted. It was forced that the dingo population is in the hundreds of thousands. Now, at this point, I'd usually tell you whether you're on the red list, the conservation categories. But, because of the controversy over breeding with dogs, they're not on this list. What I will say is that likely they are at risk from climate change, as when water becomes more scarce, there will be increased competition. But, for the moment, the dingo is in a fairly good place, and provides a vital role in the Australian ecosystem, ensuring that shrublands are able to develop without being torn apart by both cattle, livestock, and also native fauna. And with that, that's the dingo, Australia's feral fury. If you've enjoyed today's video, you know what to do. Hit that like and subscribe button with notifications on so you never miss an upload. And drop a comment with a dog emoji in it to show me that you watched to the end. As for always, Margaret has curated a selection of videos you should go and watch if you're interested in animals. I recommend the one about the second largest species of penguin. So, remember, stay out of the outback, drink water, and I'll see you in the next one.